Hi, I'm Doc Owen with Action Figure Times. I'm here with Mike Guarniere, one of the great designers at Mattel. And one of the things I've always wondered about was, and we've talked about this, about, well, how does it get from here to here and how does this actually work, right?
Yep, well, that's a good question. I'm going to take you through that process.
Awesome.
So starting out here, what does happen between them? Well, first we have to pitch a concept. We'll take one of the great characters in a show and we'll kind of create a theme. A B sheet, what we call, and we'll pitch that concept through marketing. We'll develop a strategy and determine, what we could include for a certain cost. We want to make sure we try to include to the consumer as much as possible.
Because guys, remember, Mattel is a business. They have to make money on the product. If they don't make money on the product, we don't get toys anymore.
And this usually happens about a year before the toy hits the shelf. So it's a long process and a lot goes into it. So I'm going to start out. But the next slide here is what a concept might look like. So this is where we'll go and we'll take, okay, Kid Flash, we're going to translate him into a 6-inch figure, and we really want to do something with 6-inch with that scale that we can't do with a 4 1/4, which is really show his speed.
Okay, so this is a sheet that you would draw up, right? And you say, hey, this is what I'd want to do.
Yep, so that's my actual art that I drew. That's from the show, and then this is my art that I translated. 3/4 view of how do we translate that really animated style trail into an action figure, which is something new, so we're doing something new with materials as well, and I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
And then it's just some cool accessories that we could add that aren't just in there as placeholders or fillers, really enhance that movement.
They actually have a point.
They have a point and a purpose. So then what we do is we go, okay, Kid Flash. We do have a tooling bank, so we do try to, utilize that as much as possible, but that's also to offset costs so that we could give you guys more paint finishes, things with the base, and other things that we wouldn't be able to provide if we hadn't had that. So that we go in here and we'll break it down versus what's going to be a new tooled part, which is what's going to be an existing part. And as you can see, there are quite a bit of new parts in here. We do have a new head. We did do removable goggles on this. We have the vortex. We have the flame trail. We did new lower arms and new lower legs to give you those boot details.
Okay.
All right. And then we also figure out, well, how are those going to work with the figure? Right, so we want to make sure that we understand how we're going to attach those accessories, and we're going to want to also understand how we're going to break up that base. And like I was saying with some of the new materials, with the speed trail, we want a really thin, dynamic, translucent trail, not a heavy, bulky, sculpted part. So we're doing something with reverse printed PVC sheet, which is new.
Oh, wow.
It hasn't really been done a lot in a whole lot of 6-inch bases, so we're trying something new, experimental with this line, just like the show itself is new experimental character designs. We're really trying to bring that into the toy line. So after we've had that all figured out, we go to our partners in crime here, the 4 Horsemen, who are amazing to work with.
Now at this point, before you go to the 4 Horsemen, is anything actually made or is everything just written up on paper?
Well, there are some things that are sometimes made. If you go over here, we do have rapid prototyping, which is asked a couple of times in some of our panels. Do we do rapid prototyping, and why can't that be used as a production material? Well, I mean, it's great for figuring out scale. It's great for figuring out if the proportions work.
What is rapid prototyping, just so I know?
So rapid prototyping is where you take a 3-dimensional CAD file, so you take a 3D sculpt from a CAD software program, and you translate that into what they call an STL, stereolithography file, which breaks it up into triangles, in which a printer could then 3D digitally printed. So it'll go back and forth just like a plotter would, except it's building it in 3D in layers. That gives us a really quick part, a 3-dimensional form to look at instead of just a rough 2D form. We really get to, like I said, know the scale and the functionality of the part. We do this sometimes with the bases before we send them to the Horsemen, just so that there's less for them to figure out and they could focus on the details and making the sculpt look really beautiful and dynamic. So we try to do that, and it also helps us determine if we're really investing the right cost-wise. Is there anything we could do to help put more into the figure? Is there waste happening? So we really look at that.
Is this also where you find out, is this really going to work?
Yep, a lot of that as well. We do find out if it's going to be structural, if it's going to warp, if it's going to work. If on the flame trail, we did do some prototypes to see, is that a feasible concept? Before we go any further.
So after you do all that, then you send it over to the 4 Horsemen.
Yep, we send it to the Horsemen, and sometimes we send those 3D printouts with them as well, so they have like a buck to kind of look at.
Okay.
So from there, the Horsemen will send us back a sculpt, You know, they'll have some time, they'll come back, they'll send us a sculpt, and from there we'll take a look at it, and we do have the opportunity to work with them closely on the sculpt.
How much time does that normally take? Because where are we at in, like, as far as a timeline? As far as you wrote something up and here we are.
This is usually, you know, a month or two down the line from when we first had the concept. We'll start getting our first sculpts back from them, and we'll take a look at those, and we'll go and make our overlays and our comments. You know, like we said, we work really closely with them. We're a team. They're our partners, so they're open to comments, and we'll tell them some things that we'd like tweaked or changed, and they'll implement them to the best of their ability.
Is that what I'm seeing in the white boxes? The changes that you'd like to have tweaked?
Yeah. So there's things here like how the movement of the hair and the opening of the eyes on the mask, just to have them a little bit more dynamic and bigger to enhance the way the animated look is. You know, we make sure that the body parts are accurately the ones that we are sharing are used. How things fit, how the plugs work, so the functionality of some of these parts, and we'll work with them on that as well. So once that is done, we'll also do that on the base, right? So we'll go back into the base and we'll go, okay, we'd like some more rock detail on the sides, even how parts plug in. If you looked at it originally, it was just a circular hole, so I know that if that plugged in, it's going to spin around, it's going to frustrate a lot of people trying to make that stay stable, so we'll elongate that hole and make it more of a track. So it fits in there properly, it's held secure, and it's just easier for the fans to assemble.
And so that people like me that are not detail-oriented sometimes, I can just, instead of trying to figure out how does this thing work.
We want these to be self-explanatory. You shouldn't have to have a big instruction manual to put together a base. So coming back from there, we'll get a final sculpt in which we'll submit to our licensing partner. So that's where we submit this to Warner Brothers in DC, who are great to work with, and they'll just make sure that it's on character. You know, seldomly we'll get comments back, but you know, we work really closely with them as well because this is their baby as much as it is ours, and we just want to make sure that it comes out the best.
Now, is it a little bit different working with something that's currently in media as, say, you know, some things are created just from the comic. Some things are created based upon a television show that now also has a comic. So is there more process when it actually has a TV show, or is it basically the same thing?
It's a similar process. I mean, sometimes with the comic book art, there's several different versions of the same character. So you really have to let them know what version you're going for, or if you are sharing multiple versions, you need to make sure that they understand that and they agree upon that. With the animated show, it's a little bit more straightforward. This is the version, it's on there, they're not changing it from week to week. So they really have a lot of good reference to go off of. So it's a little bit smoother, I actually would say. And then we'll also submit the base as well. They'll want to see that. Most of these bases are inspired by, so they're not directly taken from the show. So we come up with a lot of these designs, and you know, Warner Brothers will approve that, make sure it fits their character as well. And then once we get the sculpt approved, we send what we call a 2-up fast cast over to our facilities overseas, and they'll send us back a 3D translated file from that. So this is where we'll have accurate articulation added to the file, and then we'll be able to really take a look at those proportions. How does the articulation break up the figure? How the parts fit? And from there, we'll actually get we'll be able to
why is he multicolored in the shot? Is that because you're sharing different parts and things like that?
Yeah, that's usually how they break up the tools, is usually how they determine the different colors. So you can see there's multiple tools to any one figure. The other thing is we'll be able to make comments on there, and they'll be able to adjust these digitally from that point on, which is great. And this is all going to lead up to a tool-in model, and we have an example over here of a Batman, which is a tool-in model. And
now this is in a sense a reveal, because we haven't seen.
It is in a sense a little bit of a reveal. We'll be revealing a more dynamic version of him a little bit, but this is just a good example of a tool-in model, and this is going to be all grayscale. It's not going to have its color yet. It's not accurate materials, although it is cast in the same way that it would be tooled. So we do see that, like, you know, parts could come off here, and you could open them up, and you could see how things fit and articulate inside the character. So we'll take a look at all of that, you know, piece by piece. We'll break it down, we'll take a look at it, we'll comment on it, we'll make sure it all fits together correctly. We'll make sure if we think there's going to be warpage issues that we say, let's look at adding some ribs to that, let's look at bulking up the material here, let's make sure that these pins fit. Are they in the right locations to pose the figure in the most dynamic way? So that's what we'll do from that point. And then, you know, we might even make some comments at that point. Like one comment I made on the vortex here is that it had a very flat top, and you know, if it's a dynamic vortex with movement, I wanted it to have a more of a, you know,
smoky type.
Well, jagged edge. You know, more
right.
of a movement to the edge. We don't just want it to look like it was sculpted flat from a table.
Okay.
So we want to add those little details to there, and also, like I was saying, the fit of things. Now that we see how the tolerance is going to fit in the tool and how easy it is to fit them in, now we can make comments that could directly, you know, translate into the final product. So.
And you actually, is this the way you would send it to them and say, hey?
Yep, these are actual images that I would send over with comments. You know, we try to give them as much information as possible. But we do draw right over their parts. We'll give them even the vector assets if they ask for it for the line.
Okay.
But they're usually pretty good at translating just our rough thoughts.